The night was not silent. It was filled with fire, with the sound of broken walls falling, with cries that came from mothers searching for their children. In the middle of this ruined city stood one alien woman, her face wet with tears and dust. Her name was Soraya. She had lost everything in a single night. Her home was gone, her people scattered, and worst of all, her daughter had vanished in the smoke of war. Soraya ran through the streets, her legs heavy, but her heart even heavier. She shouted her daughter's name again and again, but only the sound of falling stones answered her. The enemy had come without warning. They brought machines that burned, soldiers who showed no mercy. Many were killed. Others were taken. Soraya feared her little girl was among the taken. That thought cut her deeper than any blade could. She searched the ruins like a ghost moving through fire. Her hands shook as she picked up a broken toy from the dirt. It was her daughter's small bracelet made of colorful stones. She remembered how her daughter laughed when she wore it, saying it made her feel like a princess. Now the stones were cracked, covered in ash. Soraya pressed the bracelet to her chest and felt her heart break again. All around her, shadows moved. Some were survivors crying and calling for loved ones. Others were enemy patrols searching for anyone left alive. Soraya hid when she could, slipping behind walls and broken pillars. Fear filled her body, but the thought of her daughter gave her strength. She could not stop, not yet. As the night stretched on, the fire burned less, but the silence grew more painful. The city that once lived with music and laughter was now a graveyard. Soraya stumbled over bodies she dared not look at too closely, afraid one of them might be her child. Her throat was dry, her voice broken, yet she kept whispering her daughter's name like a prayer. In her mind, memories played like stars in the dark. She saw her daughter's small hands building tiny clay figures near the river. She heard her laughter echo through the house. She remembered the warmth of holding her close before bedtime, whispering stories about heroes who always returned home. Those memories were her strength now, but they were also her torment. What if her daughter would never laugh again? When dawn finally came, the sky was gray with smoke. Soraya climbed to a high place where she could see more of the land. From there, she saw a long trail of enemy transports moving away from the city. Cages hung from their machines, and inside those cages she saw shapes, small shapes, children. Her heart stopped. Could one of them be her daughter? The hope lit a fire inside her soul. She knew then her child was not dead. She had been taken, but how could Soraya, just one broken mother, chase an army? She had no weapons, no strength left, and no one to help her. Around her, survivors spoke of leaving, of running far away to find safer lands. But Soraya could not leave, not when her daughter's voice still echoed in her heart. She clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "I will find you, no matter the cost." The day passed slowly, each moment filled with fear. Enemy patrols hunted for anyone left alive. Soraya hid in cellars, moved through tunnels, and searched for food to keep herself alive. Every corner of the city reminded her of her daughter. Every broken wall felt like a wound. Yet inside her chest, hope fought against despair. That night, Soraya sat in the ruins of her old home. The stars shone weakly through the smoke above. She held the broken bracelet in her hands and spoke softly to the night. "If you can hear me, my child, stay strong. I am coming." Her voice trembled, but her heart was firm. She would not stop until her daughter was safe. But deep in the shadows of that ruined city, unseen eyes were already watching her. Somewhere, someone had noticed this desperate mother who refused to give up. And though she did not know it yet, her path would soon cross with a warrior unlike any she had met before. A human who carried his own scars of war. Soraya did not know his face, nor his name. She did not know that he too had lost people he loved. But fate was already moving. Her grief, her hope, and her unbroken will were guiding her toward a journey that would change not only her life, but the lives of many. For now, she was only a mother in the ashes holding a broken bracelet, whispering her daughter's name into the smoke. But the war was not finished with her, and her story was only beginning. The second night after the attack was colder. Smoke still drifted in the air, and the ruins smelled of burned stone and metal. Soraya had not slept. Her eyes were red, her body weak, but her spirit refused to bend. She kept walking through the broken streets, searching for a clue. Anything that might lead her to her daughter. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every distant sound made her heart beat faster. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy, steady, not like the frightened steps of survivors. These were firm, controlled, as if the ground itself listened to them. Soraya froze, hiding behind the remains of a wall. Her hand tightened around the broken bracelet she carried. She thought it was another enemy soldier, maybe the kind who enjoyed hunting the last survivors for sport. She pressed herself into the rubble, hardly breathing. The figure came closer. The smoke shifted, and for the first time she saw him. He was tall, armored, his face partly hidden by scars and dirt. But he was not one of her people. He was human, a human warrior. Her first thought was fear. Humans had fought in many wars. Some were mercenaries who killed for coin. Some were enemies who showed no mercy. She did not know which kind this one was. She stayed silent, hoping he would pass, but he did not pass. His head turned sharp and alert. He had noticed her. With calm steps, he approached the broken wall where she hid. Soraya's heart pounded like a drum. She thought of running, but her legs refused to move. When he finally stood before her, she met his eyes. They were tired eyes, shadowed by pain, but there was no cruelty in them. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a rough voice. His words were simple, his tone quiet. Soraya did not answer. Her throat felt dry, her body tense. She still did not trust him. The human studied her for a moment, then crouched down to her level. He looked at the bracelet in her hand. "You lost someone," he said, almost like a statement rather than a question. Tears burned her eyes. She wanted to deny it, but her voice betrayed her. "My daughter, they took her." The human's face changed. His jaw tightened and his eyes grew darker. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he sat down on a broken stone beside her. "They take children," he muttered almost to himself. "They always take the children." Soraya's breath caught. She looked at him with wide eyes. "You know where they go?" she asked, her voice trembling with both hope and fear. The human nodded slowly. He reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of rough cloth. On it, a crude map was drawn. He pointed to a mark far from the city ruins. "Fortress, heavily guarded. That's where they bring them." Soraya's heart leapt. Hope flooded her veins, but fear followed quickly. A fortress? Guarded by enemies? How could she, one grieving mother, ever reach it? She shook her head. "I can't," she whispered. The human turned to her, his eyes steady. "You can't alone. But I've been there before. I've seen it," she frowned, confused. "Why would you help me? You are human. This is not your war." The man looked away, his gaze lost in the smoke-filled horizon. "I once had a family," he said quietly. "The same enemy took them. I couldn't save them. But maybe," his voice broke for just a second before he steadied it again, "maybe I can save yours." For the first time, Soraya saw not just a warrior, but a broken soul, a man carrying his own ghosts. Her fear lessened, though trust did not come easily. Still, something inside her whispered that this meeting was not by chance. The human stood and offered his hand. "If you want to find your daughter, come with me. If not, stay. But know this, time is short. The longer they keep the children, the less chance they have." Soraya stared at his hand. Her body trembled. To take it meant to trust someone she had been taught to fear. To refuse it meant losing her daughter forever. Her heart fought with her mind, but her daughter's face appeared in her thoughts, smiling, laughing, waiting. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The warrior's grip was strong, steady, unshaking. He pulled her to her feet. "Then we go together," he said. As they began walking through the ruins, Soraya noticed how he moved. Every step was measured, silent. His hand never left the weapon at his side. His eyes scanned every shadow. He was not just a fighter. He was a survivor. And now, strangely, he was her guide. That night they found shelter in an abandoned building. The human lit a small flame to keep them warm. Soraya sat across from him, watching the firelight dance on his scarred face. She wondered what kind of life he had lived, what pain he carried. She wanted to ask his name, but the words stayed locked inside her. Before she could speak, he broke the silence. "Rest while you can. Tomorrow we start the journey. It will not be easy." Soraya looked at the fire, then at the bracelet in her hands. She whispered softly, "For my daughter, nothing is too hard." The human's eyes softened, and for a moment his face almost looked peaceful. Then he nodded, his voice quiet but firm. "Then we fight." Outside, the wind carried the smoke of war, but inside that small ruin, a fragile alliance was born. Two broken souls bound by loss, now set on a path that would lead them deep into danger. Neither of them knew if they would survive. But both knew one thing: the journey had begun. And the fate of a child, perhaps even the fate of more than one, rested on their courage. The morning came with a cold wind. Smoke still lingered over the ruined city, but Soraya no longer walked alone. At her side was the human warrior. He carried a pack, a weapon, and the weight of many battles. She carried only her daughter's broken bracelet, but inside her burned a fire that no one could put out. Together they stepped into the wasteland beyond the shattered walls of her home. The land outside was silent, too silent. Fields that once grew food were now blackened by fire. Small machines buzzed in the sky like metal insects searching for survivors. The human moved carefully, his eyes sharp, his body tense. Every time a shadow passed above, he pulled Soraya into cover. She realized quickly that without him, she would have already been caught. For hours they walked without speaking. Soraya wanted to ask his name, but her throat closed every time she tried. At last, the silence became too heavy. "Why do you still fight?" she whispered. The man did not stop walking. His voice was low when he answered, "Because if I stop, I'll have nothing left." He turned his head slightly toward her. "Call me Kale. Kale," she repeated softly. The name felt strong, like stone. She nodded, as if carving it into her memory. The day dragged on. Heat rose from the burned earth. Soraya's feet bled, but she refused to slow down. Every step carried her closer to her daughter. Kale noticed her pain, yet he said nothing. Instead, he quietly adjusted his pace to match hers. His silence was not cold. It was protective, careful. By evening, they reached a ridge. From there, the horizon stretched wide, and in the distance, Soraya saw smoke rising from a cluster of metal towers. Kale pointed. "Outpost. Not the fortress, but close. We go around it. If they see us, we're done." Her heart pounded. She had never been so close to enemy ground. "What if they catch us?" she asked. Kale looked at her with calm eyes. "Then we don't let them." That night, they made camp in the remains of an old farmhouse. The roof had collapsed, and vines crawled through the broken walls. As Kale prepared a small fire, Soraya watched him. He was careful with every move, wasting nothing, using scraps of metal and wood like a craftsman. His scars told a story of survival, and she wondered how many battles he had fought, how many people he had lost. When they ate, Soraya could barely swallow. Her stomach twisted with fear and hope. "Do you think she's alive?" she asked suddenly, her voice trembling. Kale looked at her across the fire. "Yes," he said firmly. "I've seen how they work. They don't kill the children. They use them. That means your daughter is alive. But we must move fast." Tears filled her eyes. For the first time in days, hope felt real. She nodded, holding the bracelet tighter in her hand. "Then we keep moving." Sleep did not come easily. Every sound outside the ruins made Soraya jolt awake. She saw Kale sitting against the wall, his weapon across his knees, eyes open. He did not sleep. He guarded. For the first time, she felt a strange sense of safety, not from her people, but from this human. The next day, their journey grew harder. The ground turned to stone, sharp and uneven. Patrols moved closer. Twice, Kale pulled her into caves while machines scanned the land. Inside the dark stone, their breathing echoed. Once, when a patrol passed too close, Soraya grabbed his arm in panic. His muscles were tense as steel, but he did not shake her off. Instead, he whispered, "Quiet, trust me." She did. Hours later, as the sun burned high, they found fresh tracks in the dirt. Small footprints, too small to be adults. Soraya's heart raced. "Children," she whispered. Kale crouched to study them. "Taken this way," he said. His voice carried both anger and certainty. "We're on the right path." The tracks led toward the mountains. Soraya felt her legs weaken, but Kale pushed forward with relentless pace. He seemed to draw strength from the chase itself, as if his own ghosts fueled his steps. That night they sheltered in a cave. The wind outside howled like lost spirits. Soraya sat near the fire, her daughter's bracelet in her lap. Kyle sharpened his blade, the metal scraping softly. Finally, she asked the question that had haunted her. "Why me? Why my child? Why do they take them?" Kyle paused. His eyes flickered with shadows. "Because children are hope, and hope is what they want to break." His words struck her like a blade. She looked into the fire, silent tears on her cheeks. But instead of despair, anger filled her chest. Her daughter was not just a victim. She was a target because she represented hope. And Soraya swore that hope would not be destroyed. Kale watched her silently, as if seeing the fire inside her. He nodded once. "Good, hold on to that. We'll need it." The cave fell quiet. Beyond its walls, the world was dangerous and merciless. But inside, two souls, an alien mother and a human warrior, were no longer strangers. Their journey had begun, and it would lead them deeper into danger than either of them could imagine. And far away, in the cold heart of an enemy fortress, a little girl whispered her mother's name in the dark. The mountains rose like black teeth against the sky. Cold winds cut through the stone paths, carrying whispers that made Soraya shiver. She and Cale had followed the children's tracks for 2 days, always moving, always hiding. Each step took them deeper into enemy territory. The land itself seemed poisoned. No birds sang. No animals stirred. Only the hum of distant machines broke the silence. Soraya walked behind Cale, her eyes fixed on his strong back. He moved with purpose, never hesitating, as if he knew every danger before it appeared. She wondered what kind of life had shaped him into this. Sometimes, when the wind blew his hood aside, she saw scars that told their own stories. Each mark was a memory of survival. On the 3rd night, they found shelter in a hollow cave. The air inside smelled damp, but it was safe from the enemy's patrols. Cale lit a small flame, its light painting shadows on the walls. Soraya sat across from him, clutching her daughter's bracelet. She could not hold back her questions anymore. "You said you've seen the fortress," she whispered. "What is inside?" "What do they do with the children?" Cale's hands paused as he cleaned his weapon. His eyes grew darker, filled with memories he wished to forget. For a moment, Soraya thought he would not answer. Then in a low voice he spoke. "They test them," he said. "They look for strength, for gifts hidden in their blood. They break them to see who survives. Some are used for labor. Others—" His voice trailed off, but Soraya's heart understood the rest. Her stomach twisted with horror. She imagined her daughter trapped in a cold cage, frightened and alone. Her hands shook as she held the bracelet tighter. "Why children?" she asked, her voice trembling. Cale's gaze lifted to her. His face was hard, but his eyes carried sorrow. "Because children are easier to shape, easier to break, and because the enemy fears what they may become if left free." The cave grew silent except for the crackle of the small flame. Soraya closed her eyes, fighting tears. Her daughter was not just stolen. She was a prisoner in a place designed to crush her spirit. The thought filled Soraya with rage that burned hotter than her grief. Kyle watched her quietly, then spoke again. "I lost people too," he admitted. "Not children, but my squad. Soldiers I trained, men I fought beside. They were taken into the fortress. I tried to save them, but I failed." His jaw tightened. "I swore I'd never walk away again." Soraya looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. Beneath the scars and steel, Cale was a man haunted by loss, just like her. Their pain was different, yet it was the same. Slowly she nodded. "Then we will not fail this time." The next morning they climbed higher into the mountains. From the cliffs, Cale pointed toward the horizon. There, hidden in a valley of black stone, stood the fortress. Soraya gasped. The walls were made of dark metal, sharp and cruel. Towers rose into the sky, their lights piercing the clouds. Strange machines circled the air above like predators. Her knees weakened at the sight. "How can we fight this?" she whispered. Cale's eyes narrowed. "Not by fighting. By slipping through the cracks. Every fortress has a weakness. We just have to find it." They spent the day watching from a distance. Cale marked the patrol routes, the way the gates opened, the timing of the machines above. He moved like a hunter studying prey, patient and precise. Soraya followed his lead, though her heart pounded with fear. That night, as they hid among the rocks, they saw something that made Soraya's breath catch. A transport vehicle rolled through the gates. Inside its cages were children, small figures, their faces pale under the harsh lights. For a brief moment, Soraya thought she saw her daughter's hair, her shape. Tears blurred her vision. Cale grabbed her arm before she rushed forward. "Not yet," he warned. "We can't risk it. If we move now, we lose everything." Soraya's chest ached with the weight of staying still. Every part of her wanted to scream, to run, to break the gates open with her bare hands. But Cale's grip held her back. She bit her lip until it bled, whispering her daughter's name under her breath. Hours later, when the fortress grew quiet, Cale spread out the crude map again. He pointed to a mark on the side of the walls. "There," he said. "A drain tunnel. Small, guarded lightly. It leads inside." Soraya looked at the dark mark on the map, then at the fortress glowing in the distance. Her fear battled her hope. "It could be a trap," she whispered. "It could," Cale agreed. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with determination. "But it's also our only way in." The wind howled around them, carrying the metallic scent of the fortress. Soraya closed her eyes and held the bracelet tight. In the silence of her heart, she promised her daughter again, "I am coming." Beside her, Kyle tightened the straps on his armor and prepared his weapon. The scars on his face seemed sharper in the moonlight, but his voice was calm. "Tomorrow night we enter," he said. Soraya's breath caught. The moment she had both dreaded and prayed for had come. The fortress loomed like a beast waiting to devour them, but she would not turn back. She could not. Her daughter's life waited inside those walls. As the stars glittered above the mountains, two figures sat in the cold night, an alien mother and a human warrior. Their bodies were weary, their hearts heavy, but their spirits burned with the same fire. Tomorrow they would step into the heart of the enemy, and tomorrow the true test of courage would begin. The night was black and cold when Soraya and Kyle moved down the mountain toward the enemy fortress. Clouds covered the stars and the moon gave no light. The world itself seemed to hold its breath as if waiting for something to break. Soraya's heart pounded in her chest, each beat louder than her footsteps. In her hand, she still held the broken bracelet. It had become more than a memory now. It was her strength, her guide. Kyle led the way, crouched low among the rocks. His movements were silent, steady. He had studied the patrols for 2 days, counting each guard, each machine, each moment when the walls seemed weakest. Soraya trusted his every step, though fear clawed inside her with every shadow that moved. At the base of the fortress, the walls loomed above them, black metal rising like a mountain built by hands that hated light. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the surface, pulsing like a heartbeat. The gates were massive, guarded by soldiers with glowing weapons. But Kale had not brought them to the gates. He brought them to the side, to the drain tunnel hidden among jagged rocks. The tunnel was narrow, covered in slime and filth. The smell made Soraya gag, but she forced herself forward. She imagined her daughter, trapped inside, waiting in the dark. What was a little filth compared to that? Kale went first, sliding through the tunnel on his stomach. Soraya followed, her heart racing, her hands scraping against the wet stone. Inside, the tunnel was almost too tight. Darkness pressed around them, broken only by the dim light of Kale's small lamp. The sound of dripping water echoed, making every noise feel louder. Once, Soraya thought she heard footsteps above, and she froze. But Kale looked back, pressed a finger to his lips, and moved on. His calm gave her courage. Finally, the tunnel opened into a larger space. They crawled out into the underbelly of the fortress, where pipes ran along the walls and steam hissed from vents. The air was hot and smelled of metal. Soraya wiped her hands on her clothes, her body trembling from both fear and determination. Kale motioned for silence. They crept along the narrow passage, their footsteps muffled by the hum of machines. Strange lights flickered above, bathing the hall in red and white flashes. Soraya had never been inside a place like this. It felt alive, like the fortress itself was watching them. At one corner, Kyle stopped suddenly. He held out his arm to block Soraya. Ahead, 2 enemy soldiers walked past, their voices sharp, their eyes glowing faintly under their helmets. Soraya's breath caught, and she pressed herself against the wall. Kale waited motionless until the soldiers were gone. Then he looked back at her, his eyes steady, and nodded. They moved again, deeper into the fortress. Each step made Soraya's fear heavier, but her resolve stronger. Then in the distance she heard something that made her knees weaken. A sound, small, faint, but real. Children crying. Her throat tightened. She wanted to run toward the sound, but Kale's hand caught her shoulder. "Not yet," he whispered. His voice was low, firm. "We need to be sure." They followed the sound, slipping through shadows, hiding behind machines and crates. Finally, they reached a barred window that looked into a chamber. Soraya pressed her face to the cold metal and gasped. Inside were cages, dozens of them. And inside those cages, children. Some were too weak to stand. Others clung to each other, their faces pale and frightened. Soraya's eyes searched wildly, her heart screaming for one face among them. Then she saw her daughter, small, thin, but alive. She sat curled in the corner of a cage, holding another child's hand. Tears blurred Soraya's vision. She covered her mouth to stop from crying out. Her daughter was alive, alive! Every part of her wanted to rush in, to break the cage open with her bare hands. But Kale's hand gripped her arm hard. "Not now," he said, his voice almost a growl. "If we move without a plan, we die." "And so do they," Soraya trembled. The sight of her child so close yet so far was torture. She pressed the bracelet against her lips, whispering a promise only she could hear. "I will take you home. I swear it." Kale pulled her back into the shadows. "We wait until shift change," he said. "Fewer guards. More chance to strike." The hours dragged like years. Soraya crouched in the dark, her body tense, her eyes fixed on the cages she had left behind. Kale sat beside her, calm but watchful, his weapon ready. She could see the focus in his eyes, the cold fire that had carried him through wars. When the guards finally changed, Kale gave the signal. Together they moved like shadows through the corridor. Every step closer brought Soraya's heart to the edge of breaking. She could almost hear her daughter's voice now. At last they reached the chamber doors. Kyle placed his hand on the handle, looked at Soraya and nodded. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Soraya's breath caught. This was it. The moment she had feared and prayed for. The moment that would decide everything. Kale pushed the door open. The sound of metal echoed. The room beyond lay in silence for only a second. Then alarms blared, red lights flashing like blood on the walls. Soraya's heart froze. The enemy had seen them, and the fortress at last had awakened. The alarm screamed through the fortress like the cries of dying beasts. Red lights flashed across the walls and heavy doors slammed shut one by one. Soraya's heart leapt into her throat. She had waited so long to see her daughter, and now, just as she was within reach, the enemy had discovered them. Kale reacted instantly. His weapon was in his hands, his body moving like a storm unleashed. "Stay behind me!" he shouted over the wail of sirens. He fired at the guards rushing toward them, each shot echoing like thunder. Metal sparks lit the room as enemies fell, but more kept coming. Soraya pressed herself against the wall, clutching the broken bracelet. Her eyes locked on the cages. Her daughter was there, so close she could almost touch her. The little girl clung to the bars, her face pale, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. "Mother!" she cried. Tears streamed down Soraya's face. "Hold on, my love. I'm coming." Kale's voice cut through the chaos. "The control's there." He pointed to a panel across the chamber. If they could open it, the cages would unlock. But the path was swarming with soldiers in black armor. Soraya's heart pounded. Kale could not fight them all. Already blood trickled down his arm from a wound, but he did not stop. He moved like a man who had nothing left to lose. His blade flashed in the red light as he cut down another enemy. Soraya's mind screamed at her. She could not just stand there. Her daughter needed her. Kale needed her. With trembling hands, she grabbed a piece of broken metal from the floor. It was sharp enough to cut. She clenched it tightly and ran toward the control panel. The soldiers saw her and charged. One swung at her, but Kyle leapt between them, his weapon carving through the soldier's armor. "Go," he barked. "Don't stop." Soraya stumbled to the panel, her fingers shaking as she searched for the right switch. Symbols she didn't understand glowed across the surface. Her breath came fast, panic clawing at her chest. What if I pressed the wrong one? Then she heard her daughter's voice again. "Mother, please." That sound gave her courage. She slammed her hand on the largest switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then with a hiss of steam, the cages began to unlock. Doors swung open, one after another. The children cried out, scrambling to freedom. Her daughter ran into her arms. Soraya dropped the bracelet and lifted her child, hugging her so tightly she feared she might break her. Tears and laughter spilled from her together. "I found you. I found you, my heart." But the battle was not over. The soldiers, seeing the children freed, grew more vicious. They charged in waves, their weapons cutting the air. Kale fought like a beast surrounded, his movements quick, brutal, unstoppable. Blood streaked his face, his body covered in wounds, yet he never fell. Soraya held her daughter close, shielding her with her body. The other children clung to each other, too weak to run. Kale saw them and roared, driving himself forward, striking down anyone who tried to reach them. But even Kale could not fight forever. His steps slowed. His arm bled heavily now. A blade cut across his side and he stumbled. Soraya's heart froze. "Kale!" she screamed. He gritted his teeth, pushing himself up again. His eyes burned with fire. "Get them out," he shouted. "I'll hold them." Soraya's throat closed. "Leave him." After everything he had done? After how he had fought not for himself, but for her daughter, for all the children? No, she could not. But Kale's gaze was firm, his body standing like a wall between her and the enemy. "Go," he roared. Tears blurred her vision, but Soraya obeyed. She gathered the children, guiding them toward the open tunnel. Her daughter clung to her hand, refusing to let go. Behind them, Kyle fought like a man already dead but refusing to fall. As they ran, the fortress shook with explosions. Kale had thrown grenades behind him, buying them time. The walls cracked, flames bursting through. Soraya pushed the children through the tunnel, her body aching, her spirit burning. She turned one last time. Kale stood at the chamber's heart, surrounded by enemies. His weapon glowed red with heat, his breath harsh. Yet his stance was unbroken. For one brief moment, his eyes met hers across the fire and smoke. And then, with his last strength, he shouted, "Take her home!" The tunnel collapsed as the fortress exploded. The ground shook violently, throwing Soraya forward. Dust and fire chased them out into the cold night. She shielded her daughter with her body, praying, crying, hoping. When the world finally grew still, the fortress was burning behind them, a tower of fire collapsing into ash. The children sobbed, clinging to Soraya. Her daughter buried her face against her chest, but Soraya's eyes searched the flames desperately. Where was Kale? Her heart begged for a miracle, and in the smoke through the fire she saw a shadow stumbling toward them, broken, bleeding, but alive. Kyle Soraya's breath caught, tears streaming down her face. She ran to him, supporting his body as he nearly fell. He gave her a weak smile, blood staining his lips. "Told you, I'd get her home." Soraya held him, trembling. Her daughter's small hand touched his, her voice soft but strong. "You saved us." And in that moment, as the fortress burned behind them, Soraya knew the war had taken much, but it had also given her something new. A warrior who carried his pain like armor, yet chose to fight for a child that was not his. The fire of the fortress burned all night, painting the sky red like a second sunrise. Soraya sat among the rocks with her daughter in her arms. The other rescued children gathered close. Their small faces were pale and frightened, but they were alive. That was enough. Every time she touched her daughter's hair, every time she felt her breath against her chest, Soraya whispered thanks to the stars. But not all was peace. Kyle lay nearby, his body broken and bleeding. His armor was torn, his face pale. He breathed in shallow gasps, each one sounding like it might be his last. Soraya knelt at his side, pressing cloth against his wounds. Tears streamed down her face. "Stay with us, Kyle," she begged softly. "You can't leave now. Not after all this." Kale's eyes fluttered open. He gave her the faintest smile, weak but full of warmth. "You found her," he whispered, his voice rough like gravel. "That's all that matters." Soraya shook her head fiercely. "No, you matter too. Without you, none of us would be here." Her daughter crawled closer, placing her small hand on Kale's arm. Her eyes shone with tears, but her voice was steady. "You're my hero," she said. For a moment, Kale's eyes softened. He closed them, letting the words sink into the deepest wounds of his heart. Perhaps for the first time in years, he felt like more than a soldier, more than a man carrying scars. He felt like something greater, someone worth saving. With the dawn, they began their journey home. The path was long and harsh, but Soraya led the children with a strength she had never known she carried. Kale leaned on her when he could walk, and when he could not, she and the older children helped carry him. Every step forward was heavy, but every step was freedom. Days passed, and at last the ruins gave way to the edge of Soraya's homeland. Survivors had gathered there, the few who had escaped the destruction. When they saw Soraya return, carrying children who were thought lost, cries of wonder and joy filled the air. Families rushed forward, tears and laughter mixing together as they embraced their young. Soraya stood in the center, her daughter clinging to her side. She raised her voice so all could hear. "They are not gone. They are not broken. We brought them back." The people cheered, their voices rising like thunder, shaking the mountains with hope reborn. Yet in the middle of that joy, Soraya's eyes turned to Kale. He sat on the ground, his wounds still raw, his strength fading. But instead of bitterness, the people looked at him with awe. A human warrior, once thought only an enemy, had walked into fire for their children. Mothers knelt before him, fathers bowed their heads. He had become something none of them expected, a protector. Soraya's daughter stepped forward, her small voice carrying in the silence that followed. She looked at Kale with shining eyes and said, "You are my second father now." The words hung in the air like a blessing. Kale's eyes widened, then softened. A single tear slipped down his scarred cheek. He reached out, resting his hand gently on the child's shoulder. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Then I will guard you always." From that day, Kale was no longer alone. He stayed among Soraya's people as he healed. At first, many were wary of him, but slowly respect replaced fear. Children followed him, learning from his strength. Adults listened to his words, for he knew much about war and survival. Soraya watched him with quiet eyes. She saw the way he carried his pain, but she also saw how her daughter's laughter brought light back into his face. Where once he had lived only for battle, now he lived for something greater. He lived for them. Weeks later, as the stars filled the night sky, Soraya stood outside her rebuilt home. Kale sat nearby, sharpening his blade though there was no battle to fight. She walked over and placed the broken bracelet in his hand. "It belongs to her," Kale said gently. Soraya shook her head. "It belongs to you now. You carried us through the fire. You are part of this family." Kale stared at the bracelet, the tiny stones cracked but still glowing faintly in the starlight. Slowly he closed his hand around it. For the first time in many years he felt whole, and so the story of Soraya, her daughter, and the human warrior spread across the land. It became a tale told by firelight, whispered by children before sleep, carried by survivors to distant villages. A tale of a mother who would not give up, a daughter who held on to hope, and a human who chose to fight for a child that was not his own. The war was not over. The enemy still lingered in the shadows, but hope had returned stronger than ever. And in that hope lived a promise that no matter how dark the night, there would always be warriors who would rise, and families who would endure. Soraya looked at Kale and her daughter playing together under the starlight, and her heart whispered the truth. Sometimes family is not only who you are born to, but who fights beside you when all seems lost. And from that night forward, they were no longer just survivors. They were a family,